Hello and welcome to another episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr. Thank you so much for listening, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. Last week, or our last episode, I don't know if you follow along or if you just listen as we go, whatever, but last episode was with Citrus City Records, and it was one of our most downloaded episodes ever. Peeps really seemed to love that one. Lots of Twitter engagement. And that was a great episode. Today, we also have another good episode, so it's a good thing you pressed play. Double Whammy Records, and I'm speaking today with one of the founders, Mike, and it's this is a great label. This is one of those labels where I had been listening to a few of their records in the past year or two, and as soon as I had the idea for the podcast, they were, within the first 10 or so labels I really wanted to get a chance to talk to. And I think you're really going to love this episode, and I'm so excited for that. Before we do, I wanted to tell you, though, we're coming up to the end of the year. And again, I don't know when you're listening to this. This could be decades into the future, but we are coming to the end of the year, and hopefully take a little bit of a break, but I'm going to launch this little kind of like industry insights thing where I have some conversation with some non-label people, so some playlisting people and some authors and that kind of thing, and so those episodes are going to be really cool, and then also some other incredible labels still in the can and ready to show for you. Let's talk about how you, the listener, can get 10% off this great ebook from Work Hard, Playlist Hard. I want to tell you, our label, Other Songs, has experienced some recent micro success with Spotify playlists. And I've said in the past that playlisting has become a focus for our label because it's something that I've noticed can expose you to a new audience, as well as generate some modest, consistent income for the label and for the artist. And the success we've had recently has been due in part to two things. Number one, this new feature that Spotify has announced a couple weeks ago, where you can actually pitch your music directly to their editorial staff, as well as an interesting feature that if you give them at least a week or two lead time on a single or an album, they will include one of your songs or your new song into the release radar playlist of your followers, all of them, and that's an incredible thing. And the other contributor to some of our success has been this ebook that I'm talking to you about from this third-party curator, Work Hard, Playlist Hard, and Mike, the guy there, is a genius when it comes to playlisting, and he's compiled a lot of his research and information and facts. The book is $10. You get an extra $1 off if you go to ebook.otherrecordlabels.com and use the coupon code OTHER. It really helps us out, and I think you're really going to like this book. Actually, just like while I was in between calling you back, I brought up Lomelda on Audiotree.
Oh, nice.
Man, the audio on Audiotree is so good.
God, I know. It's like sometimes I prefer like listening to artists on Audiotree over their album. I mean, like I love, but not for Lomelda, I don't think, but like there've been a couple bands like Halfway's Audiotree is incredible, and so is Mannequin Pussies.
Probably the first time I think I heard it, my friend's band Basement Revolver did a session there a couple months ago, and I was like just blown away by like, especially this one today, the Lomelda one I was listening to on headphones. And yeah, it's just mixed like a record. It sounds so good.
Totally.
I guess that's probably one of their like the things about them that makes it so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so listen, I want to ask you about, this is like one of the labels that, I say this a lot, but this specifically is one of the labels that just has turned up in my social feed like so much in the past couple of years, and definitely in the past year or two. Everything okay there?
Yep.
Okay. like specifically like Florist and Lomelda, Howdy, and yeah. So I'm just really, really stoked to be talking to you today. Thanks for doing
That's awesome. Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
So you started the label when you were in college. Is that true? How did things?
That's true. Yeah.
How did it all get started?
Me and my friend, Dave. So we had started a band together that was called Level Up, and we were just kind of like recording in our bedrooms. Decided to put together like a cassette tape of 13 tracks that me, Dave, and our friend Nick had made. And I don't really exactly remember why we thought it was necessary to have like the name of a label attached to it, but we were just like, well, no one's going to put out this thing that we made in our bedroom. We're like, let's just put it out ourselves. Let's just call it Double Whammy. And that was it. Yeah, easy? We just like, yeah, it was that. Really, that's all there was to it. We were just like, let's make up a fake thing.
Yeah,
and this is what that was. We dubbed like 100 cassette tapes in our room. We printed out some artwork in our library and visual arts building, and just kind of like threw together a cassette tape, played a release show, which was the band's first ever show, and it just kind of went from there. It was super easy. It was super cheap. We made the money back. Like I think we both put $100 in, made the money back really quickly, and we're just like, well, there's a bunch of other bands on this campus that we really like. Let's do another one. So we started doing them for our friends and just kind of took off from there.
What year was this?
This was 2011 was the first cassette.
Okay. And okay, so you make a cassette, you dub it at home, and you print the jackets at home?
We printed the jackets in the school, like visual arts building.
Right. Okay. Okay.
But
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And did you have a website, or did you sell them online or Bandcamp?
I think we put them on Level Up's Bandcamp, and maybe we started a Tumblr.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like like a Tumblr based situation. It was super like, I don't know, unprofessional. I think we mostly only sold them on Bandcamp in the beginning.
Right.
And at shows, mostly at shows, I would say.
And back in 2011, it was still pretty arduous to put a record up on Apple or iTunes, right? Was it on iTunes?
No, we didn't have it on any like digital service providers or anything. It was just Bandcamp, and I think maybe we uploaded some stuff to SoundCloud.
Oh, okay.
And that was what like some blogs were posting. I don't even know. They might have just been posting the Bandcamp link.
So, like, did you get a good response, like, from people outside of your friend circle from this release?
Sort of, yeah. Some like pretty small blogs picked it up at first when we did this cassette release, but it was pretty quickly picked up by this label in Philadelphia called Evil Weevil, who wanted to put it out on vinyl.
Wow.
And so that came out in February of 2012, just maybe 6 months after the original release.
Sorry, and how did you record the record?
Just like in GarageBand.
Oh my gosh.
It was just like GarageBand in our bedrooms and sometimes in the student center, which we had access to like some practice spaces in the student center.
Yeah.
So we would all have like band practice there.
So you must have been pretty stoked when a label wanted to do vinyl in 2011.
Yeah, it was the first like piece of vinyl that any of us were ever on, because we were all playing in different bands too, who also put out some LPs later on. But this was like kind of our first time, and it felt really cool. So
you had already started Double Whammy as a just for this release. When you got signed to this other label, what happened to Double Whammy? Was it a co-release, or did you just put that on hold?
So DDW just did the cassette, and we were only doing cassettes for a while.
Okay.
Then when Evil Weevil decided to, I guess it was like I don't want to call it a reissue, but it was like they just they put it out on vinyl 6 months later.
Right.
And that was just them. DDW wasn't involved at all. And that was kind of when the band got a little more recognition, just because it was a little bit of a wider release and a more well-known label. Evil Weevil was putting out some really cool music at the time. They had done like some Big Eyes stuff, Diarrhea Planet, and just like a bunch of cool like Philly punk bands.
Right.
But that was when kind of more people started paying attention to the band. And whenever people pay attention to the band, it kind of, it's so, Level Up and DDW are so linked that when people start paying attention to Level Up, they automatically find out about DDW and vice versa most of the time.
And there's a connection too, sonically too, like people will probably like the other bands.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like that first release, Level Up Space Brothers, was kind of like set the tone for what a lot of the releases that were going to come out on the label sounded like.
Right. So did you have so the 6 months after the first release was Level Up, and then it got picked up half a year later on vinyl. What happened in those 6 months? Did you do other releases on DDW?
Yeah, I think we probably did about 2 or 3 more cassette tapes for just some friends' bands around. We went to SUNY Purchase, so these were mostly all SUNY Purchase bands.
Okay.
We would just do like a run of 100 cassette tapes, and then when they were sold out, they were gone forever. They weren't distributed to any, streaming services or whatever. Most of them still exist on Bandcamp, but even I've gone back and tried to find some of the oldest releases, and I can't find them anywhere.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. So those exist on like 100 cassette tapes and like nowhere else.
Yeah, yeah. The like when you talk about for people outside of indie label circles, when you talk about cassettes today in 2018, a lot of people will give you a funny look. What was it like in 2011?
I think for the world that we were existing in, they made a lot of sense because all of like our bands and all of our friends' bands, like basically all the artists that we were playing with and working with, we're all just playing in basements, either like apartment shows or basement shows or whatever, just like super DIY spots. And everyone was only selling cassette tapes. It's like if you had a piece of vinyl, it was kind of a big deal. Yeah. It seemed like it was like, oh, like you have like an album that's like you're pretty legit or whatever. Yeah. So in the small like niche scene that we were in, it wasn't weird at all. Right. I guess when we talked about it to our, parents or whatever, like, oh yeah, I'm putting out some cassette tapes. They were just like, those still exist,
Did you consider CDs at all?
No, I honestly, CDs were the last format that we adopted at DDW because from cassettes we jumped to doing. We did a couple 7-inches and then we did our first like 12-inch. And it was probably not until 2016, honestly, that we started doing CDs. Wow,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and some releases I still don't even do CDs for.
Yeah, I saw
they're
that.
Kind of like the worst selling format for us.
But there's still enough that it's still worth it to do it. Is that right?
Usually we do them for promotional purposes.
Okay.
We'll send them to like radio stations because a lot of stations won't play.
MP3s.
Right. Like they'll just disregard downloads and they'll only play CDs or whatever. Right. So we send them out for promotional purposes like that, and then we'll put a few for sale online. The bands will take them on tour.
Yeah, and I mean, like nowadays they're so cheap to make, and I mean you can make 20, you can make 50 of them, and it's not. Yeah, I see what you mean. Was there, so going back, like I said at the beginning of this, and I wasn't just blowing smoke here, but this is a label that pops up in my feed so much, not specifically the label, but Hovvdy and Lomelda and Florist. I mean, those are such gorgeous records. And Frankie Cosmos. And even the stuff that you're pre-releasing and just announcing now, it's like those are the things that the writers and the publicists that I follow on Twitter they're retweeting about and talking about. So it seems, your label is definitely, in my opinion, or at least from what I'm seeing in my algorithm, is right at the top for indie releases. Was there like a turning point for your label in the past 7 years, or was it just a slow build?
Well, that's really cool to hear, first of all. But I think, I look back on this one like defining moment for the label, of it kind of like stepping into like a new, I don't know, level or whatever. And that was when we put out that first Frankie Cosmos record.
Okay.
So basically what happened is we were just doing cassette tapes, couple 7-inches that weren't really selling that well. And then Frankie Cosmos was a super small band at that time too, just like another band we were playing shows with like at Purchase and in New York City and wherever. But they had a fairly small fan base the same way that the label did. And we were talking to them about doing a cassette tape, which, that's what Zentropy was going to exist on, was just a cassette tape. But then when we heard the record, it kind of like blew us both away. And we were just like, man, like this needs to be on vinyl. Like I want to own this on vinyl. And we were like, let's just do it, I guess. So we both invested, we both like put it on our credit cards basically and decided because it was still me and Dave at this point.
Right.
We just decided like, let's make the investment. Let's both put whatever, a couple $1,000s in or whatever, and like make this big jump. We had just graduated college at this point. It was 2013 when we started working on that record.
And it came out in 2014, right?
It came out, in the beginning of 2014. I think March 2014. Yeah. And it was kind of this weird overnight success that for both the band and for the label. And it felt kind of like we were getting thrown into the deep end.
Right.
And I think enough people at that point were kind of looking at the label where when we started getting in over our heads, like a few people kind of like reached out to us and were like, hey, like we see what you're doing. We want to help you. And kind of made sure that we didn't completely like run the label into the ground. And I feel like it's been that way ever since, just like people being like, I believe in what you're doing. Like, I want to help you not like fail. Basically.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's been really, really cool.
What was it about what happened with the record that made it an overnight success? I mean, aside from being a great record, but what?
I think like, it's so funny. I remember so specifically we were talking to Greta about wanting to do an LP, and we were thinking maybe we could do 300 copies of this LP. And she was like, I don't even have 300 fans on Facebook. And we were just like, yeah, but I feel like, people will hear this and they're going to want to buy it. It's like really, really good. And she said, okay. And I think we put up the pre-order. Me and Dave were on tour with Level Up at the time, and we put up the pre-order and checked it like in the next morning after the first song had come out. Yeah. And it had like 100 pre-orders.
No way.
It was crazy. And like at that point, we had only been doing cassette tapes of like, runs of 100 or whatever. Yeah. And we had sold that many LPs like overnight, and we were just like, oh shit. And so we upped the order to 500, and it just kind of took off. She got like a best new track on Pitchfork. And,
wow. Where did you premiere the single? Did you premiere it, or did she just release it, or like 100 pre-orders?
Yeah, I can't even remember. I think that she just like released it. I feel like I can't remember exactly. But we weren't doing press at that time. Like we had no idea like anything. Yeah. We didn't know we were doing it all.
I mean, that's such
was an accident.
That's an incredible story. And it's actually like, a fantasy of people who run indie labels, because you know what I mean? Like, it's like when I'm looking at, quantities for pressing, or for, maybe tapes or for vinyl, it's like when you look at that 200, you're like, okay, 200's reasonable. But then, like she said, it's like, well, hold on a second. Like, I only have, I maybe only sold 100 digital copies of my last record, and I don't even really know that many people who own a turntable. You start doing the math and you realize, like, I might only be able to sell 20 of these.
Yeah, so exactly.
That's such a great story.
Yeah, it really just felt like this crazy accident, or like just this thing that just like happened to us, or something where we really didn't expect that. We believed in the album and we wanted to put it out, but we had literally no expectations. We were just like working with our friends at the time. And that was kind of the beginning of the label being what it is now, I would say.
When you believe in a record, it must be pretty affirming to, for other people to say, yeah, this is a brilliant record.
Yeah, definitely. And it's weird because sometimes you feel that way about a record and nobody says that, and you don't sell like any copies really. Yeah. We've put out records that I believed in so hard, and I still believe in. I think they're great records that have just not gotten the attention that I feel like they deserve.
That's the trademark of my label, by the way.
It's like happens all the time. I don't know what it is that makes or breaks a band, because every release that we put out, I feel the same way about. And sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. But we've had it work a few more times. And I felt like for the first several, like after that, all of the releases we were doing, maybe for the next 10 releases, were very much like learning experiences.
Right.
Where we were trying to recreate that first thing, that we were trying to recreate what happened with the Frankie Cosmos album. And it wasn't working exactly the same way. But every time we were like, oh, so we should hire press so we could get like a premiere, or like, oh, we should be ordering this amount of records to start, or like, oh, what's distribution? Maybe we should try to get our stuff on Spotify.
Right.
Until finally we kind of had a process for what we did.
Right.
And it kind of was a little smoother sailing from there.
It's so frustrating how evasive the music industry is, and how like mysterious it is, because I've experienced the same thing where I've had a track get featured on a great Spotify playlist, and then with no press, and then the next track comes out, and so I do no press again, and I get and nobody picks it up, and it gets barely any streams. And so then I'm like, should I do press? But then it's like, well, if I pay for press, it doesn't make sense, because I didn't have to pay for press the first time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just so hard to know what to do.
Yeah. For sure. I still feel that way.
Well, that's good to hear. Was it rosy all the way up, or were there times where you wanted to shut it down, the label?
There were definitely times where we wanted to shut it down. There's definitely times where it was like really close to shutting down.
Really?
Just because like, I mean, it was such a passion project for us. Like we weren't taking any money. I was like destroying, my credit is completely destroyed because I just like was putting so many releases on just like my personal credit card, because I just wanted them to come out, and like I believed in these things. Right. And it was such a passion project. And then whenever you run into a situation where, I don't know, like just something like really shitty happens, like I can't talk specifics, but just like,
sure.
Like
a band breaks up like, or something.
Yeah. Or like, you feel underappreciated, or like you kind of get, stepped on by like bigger labels or industry people, or whatever, or like a lawyer threatens you, and you're just like, dude, I'm doing this for my bedroom. Like,
yes.
I don't have a lawyer. I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like really stressful. Or like people get mad at you for something, getting messed up, and you're just like, I don't know. But
I mean, this type of world, it does expose you to, I mean, everyone has expectations, and everyone cares about their music. And there's also a lot of artists out there who have read a lot of horror stories, and I think they feel like, oh, this label is out to take advantage of me. Maybe not that drastically, but I've worked with some people, or I've talked to some people who kind of start on the defensive, and it is weird. I know it's exactly what you mean. It is stressful to think, hold on, this is still a joke for me. This is still just like for fun,
Yeah, this is like a thing that I do because I love it, not a thing I do because I'm like trying to make a bunch of money or something.
Yeah.
Because if I was trying to do that, I would have definitely gone into a different, career.
Any career. In the last few releases, like I can hear a distinct sound. I mean, most of the releases, I think there's a distinct sound that comes from your label. Is that consistency in sound a coincidence, or is it intentional?
I wouldn't say it's intentional. I think that a lot of it comes from, at this point, like I'm the only person that's doing like A&R. So I've been kind of like picking all the things to my taste.
Right.
And it just turns out that that's what I like. But I've kind of noticed that I'm doing that, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm not like pigeonholing the label in like one certain sound.
But there is a thing where, there is a kind of a thing where if you announce a record, I feel like the core of your fans, myself included, could probably pre-order that safely without even hearing it. Do you know what I mean? And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely not. That is a good thing. And I think that what I'm trying to navigate now is how can the label continue with that kind of like built-in fan base, or like that loyalty to the label, just like thinking that whatever comes out on DDW I'm going to like because of all these past releases.
Yeah.
How can I do that but also have things that sound different?
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to like work with a few new bands that will fulfill that, hopefully. People that like the Hovvdy record and the Forest record will like this other artist that we're going to put out in a few months or whatever.
Is there a subgenre that you'd like to get into that you haven't yet?
I'm pretty open to most genres right now, but I have been like, in the office, so much of what we listen to is like pop music and a lot of like R&B. I guess like I'd be interested in diving into that world a little more. We're working this record right now that is the poppiest thing that we've done, but I think that it's still, like you said, still works with the sound of the label. We're working with this band called Hatchie.
Okay.
And it's like kind of like indie pop.
Yeah, I saw that.
Also, yeah. And it's like indie pop in the vein of, the Cranberries and but also I don't exactly know how to put it into words.
Yeah.
But but kind of going towards that direction a little bit.
I think from my perspective as someone who runs a label and wants to expose people to music, there's in the past for us it's been kind of indie folk music but I'm a huge fan of like instrumental and ambient music and drone, and it's like, man, I would love to expose people to that. But at the same time, as a music fan on the other side of things, I look at your website and I look at your records and I feel comfortable with the consistency. And I look at, just yesterday, I was like going through your pre-orders and I was looking at Sean Henry. And when I clicked on it, and this is a record that's coming out in July this month, and I looked at the album cover and I looked at the cassette, and I just like looking at the whole package, I was like, I'm going to like this. and then I clicked on the song and I did like it. And I just think there's something really, as a consumer, it's like stepping into a retail store that you normally go to and you're like, I just like everything here.
Yeah.
I don't think there's.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I want to talk about the music because, the kind of channeling off this for a second, the records have a really nice DIY lo-fi sound, but at the same time, a lot of them also marry that sound with a really lush hi-fi production. I know, like I noticed that a lot on the Florist record, and Hovvdy record feels lo-fi, but it's very, very rich and sounds great. Are you involved with the recording process at all? Does the recording process become a part of the label aesthetic at all?
Not at all. No. I mean, besides the Level Up stuff.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of that comes from, I mean, the label is still so small and so like still trying to get on its legs financially. So in the a lot of releases have been done on like little to no budget, or when there is a budget, it's like still fairly restricting. So I think a lot of the artists just use whatever resources they have available to them, and it all kind of ends up sounding this way, you know?
Right.
Because a lot of them are just like, well, I can't go into a studio because I don't have like thousands and thousands of dollars, so I guess I'll record this song, like in my bedroom or like at my friend's house or whatever. And that's how most of like the Florist record was recorded in a house upstate, the Hovvdy record was recorded in their house.
Wow.
I would say like that's kind of the case for most of the bands. There are definitely a few that have like been able to have access to a studio for whatever reason, like maybe somebody works there or maybe someone's involved in recording, but
I like how that limited resource, I mean, I'm a big fan of the studio, but I like how that fact of limited resources in a way has created a new genre. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the home recording has just created something that we're all sort of drawn to.
Totally. Yeah. It's gotten so much easier to record records that literally anyone can do it.
I'm actually surprised with when you say the Hovvdy and Florist, because they were, quote unquote home recordings, because they're mixed really well and they sound beautiful. They still have that human element, but they sound really good.
Yeah, those are a couple of cases of like, especially Florist, like everybody in that band has been so involved in like elements of recording for a long time, so they have all this like really beautiful like vintage gear.
Oh, that's great.
And like so much of that record is like, yes, it was recorded in the house, but also it's like was recorded on like analog gear or whatever.
Yeah, sure. And that's actually a good point, because I think of some of my friends who are musicians who are doing really well and who are very talented musicians. And I think part of being in today's world, part of being a good musician is, probably is having a little bit of having great gear, is knowing about studio gear, knowing how to use that gear and respecting it. I kind of feel like gone are the days where like a bunch of 17-year-olds walk into a studio and have no idea they're holding a $10,000 tube mic. I think think everyone is kind of starting to learn everything about the process, and I think that's helping.
Yeah, and I also think that people have been able to figure out like more and more creative ways to use a lot of like cheap gear that's like accessible to them,
Yeah, totally.
If you're recording at home, you're probably only going to have, I don't know, like a few $100s worth of gear that at your disposal. And I know people like Alex G, just like all of those old records, like even I don't know much about the recording of the new one, but I think even up through the last record or 2 records ago was all recorded just like straight into his computer using just like one microphone, like at home. But those records sound awesome. And like they sound really unique because he's experimenting.
Wow. Yeah. I think that there's actually, we're entering into a time where we're using analog gear and we're using the digital convenience that we have, and we're able to do something that that people 20 years ago couldn't do. And I think we have these 4-track Tascam recorders, and 20 years ago, that's all people had to record with. But now we can figure out ways to use those with Pro Tools and figure out ways to use like really good mics into these kind of crappy boxes. And I think it's creating a whole new sound.
Totally.
I think it's great. I looking at all of your releases, and especially like the releases that you did last year, which feels like that would be hard to top. And now looking at the releases you have this year, I find it very intimidating. How many records per year do you feel like you can handle? Do you ever worry about inundating the same press contacts too much or your fans too much?
Well, in terms of how many we can handle, I actually think that this year we undershot it.
Really?
I think like 2016 and 17 both. I think if I'm remembering correctly, is like we did 8 releases each of those years.
Wow.
And this year I was like, yeah, I guess we'll do 8 again. And I actually have been kind of kicking myself because I feel like we could have handled 10. But that being said, like a lot of planning goes into our releases now, like very advanced planning. So if I were to take on a record now, it probably wouldn't come out till 2019 because we give ourselves like a long time, which I think has been really helpful for the label in terms of like rolling out things pretty concisely,
right, yeah.
or like intentionally.
And
but yeah, we could have done 10.
Wow, that's great. And so that's like you're looking at like pretty much one a month minus Christmas and something else.
And and I feel like usually most of November and all of December, I would say like we avoid putting out records just because like that's when press kind of starts like wrapping up for the year, doing year-end lists, and there's like a lot of holidays, and so we kind of avoid those months.
Yeah, no, that's smart. Oh, that's interesting. And I always wonder that too. Like I always worry. I mean, especially for you, you've said, for the most part, it's just you. And so, I
actually have, so it was me and Dave.
Okay.
And Dave ended up leaving in 2016. So it was just me for a while. And I think that's why 8 releases per year is what was in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But actually I've just recently this year, 2018, have hired my first person to work with me. So
congrats.
It's not just me anymore. Thanks.
That's great.
Yeah, it feels kind of crazy, honestly. But
I want to ask you a little bit about like pitching a record and press. This is something that's really daunting to a lot of small labels like myself. The strategy for a lot of people who don't have a strategy is just to send 1 million emails and hope that something sticks. Has there been a reliable strategy for you when it comes to pitching a record? What advice would you give to smaller labels?
So I guess it would kind of depend when you ask me. It's like way back when we started, maybe for the first 2 or 3 years, we were doing that strategy where we just like, there was like so much more of a presence on Tumblr at that time, like Blogspot and Tumblr, where we would spend a long time going through all these like blogs that we really liked, finding like a contact somehow on that blog, and just like messaging them and seeing how many of these tiny blogs we could get to like pick up these streams.
Yeah.
And then we started hiring out, but hiring out for PR is so stressful because just because you're paying for a service doesn't mean that the person working it like actually cares about the release. And like I feel like we run into this thing where we spend a couple $1,000s or whatever doing press, and were really disappointed by the results. And like this person just didn't care. They were hired to do the thing and whatever. But actually since January 2015, we've used the same press person for every release that we've done.
Awesome.
For 3 years now. And the reason we do that is because we know that this person really cares about the releases, really cares about the label, and is going to take the time and effort that it takes to run a successful campaign. So that's just kind of something that we learned from trial and error, working with a few different people, trying it ourselves, until finally we found one person that we really felt like could represent us in a way that we felt good about.
That's great. I never thought of that. And to think that you found someone who's like an extension of the label, like essentially like a contract, like a staff member or something.
Totally, yeah. Like Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Like who gets to know all your releases, your previous releases, your forthcoming releases. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. He knows like everything about the label and the releases, and even before, like sometimes I'll just bounce ideas off him, like just like, hey, what do you think of this? Like I'm thinking of releasing this or signing this band, like. And kind of like getting a second opinion. Yeah, work very closely together. It's really cool.
That's an amazing to be able to have that relationship and trust that relationship, because there's times where I'm like, you thinking about asking, should I hire this company to pitch this record? But it's like, well, of course they're going to say yes. Like if I ask them, like, do you think this record has a good chance, or this single has a good chance of getting picked up by these blogs or whatever, like I feel like in my heart I'm like, they're gonna say yes because they want the money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So it's nice to get an honest answer from someone.
Yeah, and I think that a big part of it was that he originally reached out to us and was just like, hey, I love the label, like I would love to work on something sometime.
Oh, nice.
And so it's like, oh, this person actually cares and like knows what's going on. But that's the other thing is we do, like, part of my strategy has been forming these really strong relationships with different people that we work with. So it's kind of the same thing goes for radio. We've worked with the same like radio people for a few years now, and I bounce ideas off them all the time because I trust them. They know exactly like what's going on with the label, and it feels like an extension of the label.
That's so great to be able to have people that you trust, who could do as good a job as you or better, and frees you up to do what you're good at.
Yeah.
Your own band, Level Up, we started talking about that. It essentially started the label, but you guys were eventually signed to Sub Pop. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah.
So were you signed to Sub Pop and running DW at the same time? Yep.
Wow. And yeah, touring like pretty consistently, and
what was that
running
time
the label
like?
From the road? It was really stressful. It was like running the label while on tour was really hard, and I wouldn't want to have to really do it again for an extended period of time, because I was just spending all day looking at my phone, like trying to answer emails as like quickly as I could, and like decide what emails were more important than the other ones, like what I need to respond to right now and what can wait until I get back in a few weeks.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. That's incredible. And was it a co-release in any way, or was Level Up completely removed from DDW?
Yeah, it was just a Sub Pop release. DDW wasn't affiliated with that record. Was called Return to Love. Mm-hmm. So they put out Return to Love, and then they put out like just a kind of like a one-off single that we did pretty recently too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. That had great artwork, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
I love that artwork. Would you... okay, so I read somewhere that you didn't want to self-release that LP, that you wanted to find a label. Why was that?
Yeah, that had a lot to do with... like DDW and Level Up were so intertwined that we found. Let me think of how to say this. Sorry. Okay, so there's a couple reasons. One is that we found that we were prioritizing other bands over ourselves. Oh, so wow. It would be like, like this like Mitski record is coming out like around the same time as the Level Up record, but like we ended up paying a lot more attention to like the Mitski record or whatever. And like Level Up ran. Oh yeah, this is what it was. Level Up ran out of Hoodwinked LPs, and which was the second Level Up record that we released. And I think Frankie Cosmos ran out of LPs at the same time, and it was like we only have enough money to repress one thing, so we went with like the other band. And I don't know, that kind of affected our band in a way where we just wanted there to be somebody that was treating our band the same way that we were kind of like prioritizing these other bands. Like we wanted our records to always be in print. We wanted them to pay for radio because like we didn't pay for that for our record or whatever.
Why do you think that you were favoring other people's records over your own? Was that to just not to appear like you're favoriting yourself?
No, I think that, I don't know. I think there was like we kind of cared more about the other artists. Right. I mean, I still kind of feel that way. I'm really happy that Sub Pop picked up Level Up because I feel like we wouldn't have done as good. Oh, obviously they're Sub Pop, but like we wouldn't have prioritized it in the way that I wanted a label to prioritize the band. Right. So yeah, there's that aspect.
Is it hard to pitch yourself as well?
Oh, like
say, check out my new record to blogs.
It got a little less hard just because we have like somebody doing PR for us now who will just like do that for us.
Right.
But I would say that was the main reason. Like we just weren't prioritizing the band the way we wanted it to be prioritized.
What did you learn about running a label from being on such a legendary label like Sub Pop? Did you learn things from them?
Yeah, totally. It was really sick.
Yeah, I bet.
When Level Up got to go to Seattle for like it was like a marketing meeting. Mm-hmm. It was just really interesting kind of hearing the way that they were going to be like rolling out the album. Like what processes they had in place, what they found worked and what didn't work. And I was asking questions too, being like, how come you guys do it this way? Like, just like really curious, like why that works better. And they were telling us like, that makes so much sense. So there've been a few things that I've tried to incorporate in DDW, and some things that I was just like, I like the way that we do it already. So I kept those. And I found out about a lot of labels because I've worked pretty closely with a few labels like that. And everyone has their own system. Like no one does it the same.
True. Yeah.
And so I draw a little bit of everything from like a little bit of this, a little bit of that from all these different labels. And then that kind of has created what DDW's processes are.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be, I mean, that's like an incredible, like, internship in a way, like just getting some insights, like actual insights, getting to be into meetings because you are the band. I think that's great. Yeah. Were they cool with you running a label on the side?
Oh yeah, they love it.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think as far as I can tell, because they really use that as part of like Level Up's narrative. Like, you know, when they're talking about like what's Level Up's story, it's like they've done this thing, they're involved in like all of these other projects that are going on, or like some of the members lived at this like venue in New York City, and some were running this label, and some are one of the members like builds his own pedals and like all of this.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
So just kind of like crafting like a narrative out of like the things that we're involved in. But they like it. They buy stuff from me. Like they stock old Level Up releases and old Frankie Cosmos releases because they also just signed Frankie Cosmos.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. Did DDW promote that Level Up record at all?
Return to Love?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, they did all the promo for it, but we,
you still
promoted
have a
it in terms of like
to those fans. Yeah.
Yeah, we were like, hey, check, like Level Up went to this other label, but like we still represent all these old things, so you should check them all out.
Yeah. Well, that's so great. That's so cool. I would say, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I would say that you guys have had, like I said, in my mind, I think you guys have had incredible success, especially in the past, like full calendar year. Just so many great releases, and yesterday, going through some of your pre-orders, I'm like, oh my goodness, they've got another year ahead of them of great stuff. Does having like a string of really well-received records put any kind of pressure on you, or is it just keep on going business as usual?
I think it just keeps going business as usual. Like I still feel like I learn something new every time we put out a record, or anytime that a record gets especially successful. Like I learn something new, which I just apply to the next release. So that's just been kind of, I feel like it's too busy to really stop and like think. I just feel like we just keep like chugging away, and it's like, okay, this worked for this, let's do it on the next album.
That's great. That's awesome, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time. It's been so great to talk to you, and I really do love your label, and I've been right at the very beginning of thinking about doing this podcast and reaching out to people. I wanted to connect with you. I'm just such a big fan.
That's so nice. Thanks so much, Scott.
You can find more about Double Double Whammy by going to their website, which is basically their name without vowels. So it's DBLWHMMY.com, and their Bandcamp is the same. And you can also probably find their records in some of your local independent record shops. So make sure that you check out their artists and grab a record, although I'm sure you probably already have. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. And you can email me at podcast@otherrecordlabels.com if there's anything you want to talk about.